We're going to talk about photosynthesis now. Photosynthesis, this is the overall reaction for photosynthesis. It's going to use sunlight energy and carbon dioxide from the air, water that is being transpired through the plant, and it's going to create sugars, and the byproduct is oxygen gas. The sugars it normally creates and transports around the plant is actually sucrose, but glucose is a precursor to sucrose, and it's going to be comparable then to respiration if we use glucose as our sugar production. So this equation is producing glucose, and one of the things that I wanted to talk about was that if you were comparing this to cellular respiration, in other words, you might notice that this equation looks a whole lot like, I'll back up again, the cellular respiration equation, except for it's backwards, right? And the only main difference would be if it was respiration going from the right side to the left, would be the energy, instead of sunlight energy coming in, it would be ATP going out, correct? So then what we have here, if you look at it on a worldwide scale, you have organisms that are using carbon dioxide and water in photosynthesis and creating organic molecules, sugars, with the byproduct of oxygen gas, and then the mitochondria are doing cellular respiration to use those sugars or organic compounds to make ATP to run what's going on in the rest of the cell. So what we would call metabolism, right? So ultimately, on a worldwide scale, plants are taking in the energy from the sun, which is a potential energy, but not a biological type of energy, because biological energy is chemical energy. So it's taking in an abiotic, if you will, energy source and turning it into an organic or biological energy source, which is chemical energy, and then it can be converted into chemical energy that can be used by the cell to do other work that the cell needs to do. If you think about this, since photosynthesis only happens during the day because that's when the sun is out, and cellular respiration happens all the time, even for a plant, the daytime photosynthesis has to be faster and outweigh or be done more than the respiration process. And this is because if it didn't, if they were equal, then what would happen is at nighttime there would be no organic compounds to run cellular respiration and organisms would die. So even in a plant that has to happen, but if you think about this on a worldwide scale, certainly there's more plants than animals on a worldwide scale, but still to keep the organisms that are not photosynthetic alive, photosynthesis has to be a whole lot faster and more efficient than the respiration process. And in fact it is. It's 3 times faster than respiration, roughly speaking. All right, so this is, mainly, like I said, the stomata, which are the holes in the plant leaf. So we'll go over this format for the leaf in just a second, or that is, the leaf structure. And there are holes in the plant leaf called stomata that will be open during the day and closed at night. And this has to do with the actual ability of the plant to take up carbon dioxide from the air. Now, one of the problems with the plant having the carbon dioxide coming in through these openings in the leaf is that it will also lose water. So plants do something called transpiration, which involves evaporation of water into the air. And this transpiration process is it moves water through the plant and allows the plant to have water, but it also is basically like a big pump, and there's a lot of water loss. So if there's, the plant then has to balance the amount of water loss between the carbon dioxide uptake during the day, and especially when it's really hot. And what would increase the evaporation is really high temperatures, very windy conditions, or very low humidity, because that increases the evaporation of water. And if those conditions were present and it was, the plant then might have trouble balancing this CO2 uptake with water loss. And we'll talk more about that a little bit later. But most of the time, you know, it's moderate temperature, moderately windy, moderate humidity, and the balance or the carbon dioxide uptake is not really interfered with by the water loss. So in most seasons, or what we call temperate regions of the world, which is why, you know, a lot of life exists there, because this is the place where you can do that pretty easily. All right, so this is sort of a general idea of photosynthesis. Let's just real quick go through the leaves where photosynthesis is occurring. You know from our talk about cells that the photosynthesis is actually occurring within the chloroplast. All right, so this is a picture of a chloroplast. Now chloroplasts are found in cells that are part of the leaf. So let's just look a little closer at this leaf. So if I were to do a cross section of a leaf, I would have cells that are inside of the leaf. So this is like the inside leaf space. That includes veins that are bringing water and taking away the sugars that are produced. Photosynthetic cells, which are called mesophyll cells, or in this case palisade parenchyma cells and spongy parenchyma. You don't need to know those names, but just the mesophyll are the photosynthetic cells. And then in the leaf surface, there's these little holes that I was talking about called stomata. And those stomata are regulated by something called guard cells that can open and close based on water balance. If the water gets really low, they get closed, or close, and if if it's really high, then they will open up, or, you know, high to moderate. Now, if they're open, they can take in carbon dioxide, they can take in oxygen or release oxygen, they can release or take in even water vapor. So these mesophyll cells are the photosynthetic cells. They have chloroplasts in them, and these chloroplasts, remember, kind of like a mitochondria, have an outer membrane, an inner membrane, sometimes called a thylakoid membrane. Those thylakoids will then wrap into pancake-like features called thylakoid stacks. And inside the thylakoid, like a particular thylakoid would be the thylakoid space. We will go over this a little bit in more detail later. These groups of stacks are also called grana. And the internal structure, like the matrix in the mitochondria, would be called the stroma, and that is where these organelles also have a single circular strand of DNA, so they can reproduce. So if there's a lot of photosynthesis happening, a plant will have a whole lot of chloroplasts, and as photosynthesis declines, the chloroplasts will also decline and degrade and be absorbed by the cell. This is an electron micrograph of the chloroplast, and this picture is also in your book.